What happens when a desperate, late-night call for help goes to the wrong number? For Andy Dante, an overworked nurse, it meant her world imploded. She wasn't calling security. She wasn't calling a friend. With one accidental dial, her trembling fingers bypassed the human world entirely and connected her to Caelan Thorne, a man of impossible power, a man who commands legions, a man who is not entirely human. She whispered her location, and by morning, the hospital was surrounded. Not by police, not by SWAT, but by a silent, disciplined army of silver wolves. The fluorescent lights of the St. Jude's Regional Hospital ER hummed a tune of perpetual exhaustion. For Andy Dante, this sound was the soundtrack to her life. At 2:38 a.m. on a Tuesday, the ER was in a rare, deceptive lull, the kind that always preceded a storm. She was restocking supply closet B, a cramped, windowless room that smelled of sterile gauze and iodine, when the door clicked shut behind her. She didn't have to turn around. The cloying scent of his cologne, an expensive brand called Savage, preceded him. "Burning the midnight oil, Andy, or just hiding from me?" Dr. Alistair Croft, Chief of Surgery, charismatic to the press, a god to his residents, and a predator to the nurses who knew better. He was handsome in a sharp, cold way, with perfectly coiffed dark hair and eyes the color of a frozen lake. "Just stocking, Dr. Croft," Andy said, not turning. Her voice was firm, but her hands, hidden by a box of IV kits, were trembling. "Did you need something?" "I need you to be more accommodating," he murmured. He stepped closer. The closet was barely big enough for one. Now, his body was pressing against her back. "I put in a good word for you with the board for that charge nurse position. A simple thank you would be nice." "Thank you, doctor," Andy said, her throat tight. She tried to step to the side, but he mirrored her movement, trapping her against the metal shelving. "That's not what I meant." His hand grazed her waist. Ice-cold panic shot through her. This was the third time this month. The first was a lingering hand on her shoulder. The second, an inappropriate comment in the suture bay. Now, this. "Dr. Croft, please," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "I need to get back to the floor." "In a minute." He crowded her further, one hand planting itself on the shelf next to her head. "We're all adults here. You know how this works. You help me. I help you." Andy's eyes darted to the door. He was between her and the handle. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. She saw her phone in her scrub pocket. She fumbled for it, her fingers slick with a cold sweat. She had the hospital security dispatch on speed dial. It was number 3. She pulled the phone out, her thumb smashing at the screen. Croft chuckled. "Who are you calling? The administrator?" "I am the administrator, in all the ways that matter." He lunged for the phone, but Andy twisted, hitting call, just as her thumb slipped off the 3 and hit 4. A number she didn't even recognize. A number she must have punched in by mistake weeks ago, maybe a typo for a pizza place. The phone didn't ring, it just connected. A voice answered on the first microsecond, a voice that didn't sound human. It was deep, resonant, and cold as the void. It vibrated with a power that made the fillings in Andy's teeth ache. The voice was pure command. It wasn't a question, it was a demand for fealty. Andy froze. Croft, startled by the voice's sheer authority, also paused. I, Andy stammered, her terror for Croft momentarily eclipsed by the voice on the line. "He won't let me leave. He has me trapped." "Where?" the voice demanded. "No, who are you? No, what's wrong?" "Just where?" St. Jude's Hospital," Andy whispered, tears welling. "Supply closet B, he's Dr. Croft." Croft, recovering his arrogance, sneered and snatched the phone from her hand. What is this? Calling your boyfriend?" He looked at the screen. The number was bizarre. +1-888. Some kind of hotline. Pathetic. He stabbed the end call button and tossed the phone onto a pile of blankets. "Now," he said, turning back to her, his eyes dark. "We've been interrupted. Let's not let that happen again. You will forget this call, and you will forget this—" The main ER doors slammed open down the hall. A code blue alarm blared. A gurney rattled past the closet. The moment was broken. Croft hissed in frustration. "This isn't over." He smoothed his pristine white coat, opened the door, and was gone. Andy collapsed against the shelves, shaking so violently she could barely stand. She retrieved her phone, her mind reeling. The call log showed the number. 22 seconds. She felt a bizarre, creeping sensation, as if that voice was still listening. She tried to brush it off. It was a prank call, a glitch. She had to get back to work, hundreds of miles away, in a study walled with ancient maps and flickering data screens. Caelan Thorne, the Alpha King of the Silver Moon Concordat, stared at the phone in his hand. It wasn't a phone. It was a dedicated line, a relic of a bygone era, enchanted to only accept calls from his global network of alphas. No human number should have been able to connect. But it had. He had heard her. A woman's voice, laced with a terror that had ignited a fire in his chest he hadn't felt in 1,000 years. The single, visceral, possessive word echoed in his mind, ancient and absolute. Mine. His beta, Lyra, entered the room, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe braid. "My king, the council is waiting." Caelan held up a hand. He stood, his 6.5-foot frame casting a shadow that seemed to drink the light. "The council is irrelevant." He walked to the window, which overlooked a vast, moonlit valley in the heart of an uncharted mountain range. His eyes, normally a sharp, intelligent grey, were now swirling with molten silver. "She called me," he said, his voice a low growl. "My mate. She is in danger." Lyra's blood ran cold. "Mate, my king, that's impossible. We have searched for centuries. A human?" "She is at a place called St. Jude's Hospital. A male, a Dr. Croft, is threatening her." The rage that rolled off him was a physical force, making the very air in the room tremble. He had crushed empires for lesser insults. "Lyra," he commanded, his voice dropping to the register he used for executions. "Scramble the war pack, all of them. Find St. Jude's Hospital. I want a perimeter by sunrise. Nothing gets in. Nothing gets out. And find me this doctor." "My king," Lyra hesitated. "A full pack mobilization. For a human. It will expose us. The political fallout." Caelan turned, his face a mask of primal fury. "I am the Alpha King. I am the politics. She called me by mistake. She will never need to call for help again." Andy finished her shift in a daze. The adrenaline from the encounter with Croft had left her hollowed out, her nerves frayed to the point of breaking. She'd filed a report, a vague, anonymous one, with HR, knowing it was useless. Croft was untouchable. She drove home through the pre-dawn mist of the city, her small sedan feeling like a paper-thin shield against the world. She kept checking her rearview mirror, imagining Croft's black Mercedes following her. She lived in a third-floor apartment, in a decent complex, the Crestview Arms, but it didn't feel safe. It didn't feel like home. She double-locked her door, wedged a chair under the knob, and fell into a restless, nightmare-filled sleep. The deep, impossible voice from the phone call echoing in her dreams. She was startled awake just 2 hours later, at 6:05 a.m., by her phone vibrating frantically on the nightstand. It was Sarah, her best friend, and a day-shift nurse. Andy answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Sarah, I'm not on till tonight. Andy, you need to turn on the news, now." Sarah's voice was pitched high with panic and disbelief. "And then you need to get down there. Or maybe you shouldn't. I don't know." "Sarah, slow down. What's wrong? Did Croft—" "No, it's— Andy, the hospital is surrounded." "Surrounded? By who? Police? A protest?" "By wolves," Sarah whispered, as if afraid of being overheard. "Massive ones. Dozens of them. They're just sitting there. The police are here, but they're staying back. They're terrified. And Andy, there's a man. He's asking for you." A cold dread, heavier and more profound than her fear of Croft, settled over Andy. It couldn't be. The call. The voice. She hung up, her hands shaking again, and fumbled for her TV remote. She flipped to the local news. The footage was grainy, shot from a helicopter. The reporter was struggling to describe the scene. "Authorities are at a loss. It appears to be at least 50, possibly more, enormous wolves. They are incredibly disciplined. They are not advancing. They are simply holding a perimeter around the entirety of St. Jude's Regional. We've been told they are not coyotes. They are not a known species. They are, well, they're enormous." The camera zoomed in. They weren't just wolves. They were silver. Their fur seemed to catch the weak morning light and shimmer. They sat on their haunches, perfectly still, their breath pluming in the cold air. They were creatures of myth. And then the camera panned to the main ER ambulance bay. A man stood there, alone, flanked by two of the largest wolves. He wore no uniform, no tactical gear. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that looked like it cost more than Andy's car. He was tall, with broad shoulders and an air of absolute, terrifying authority. He was scanning the hospital, his gaze intense enough to be felt through the screen. "Andy," she whispered to herself, "he's asking for you." She moved on autopilot. She threw on her scrubs, grabbed her keys, and ran out the door. She didn't know why. She should have been running in the opposite direction. But that voice on the phone, it hadn't just scared her. It had called to something deep inside her, something that recognized the power and, strangely, the protection. She drove, her sedan the only car heading toward the hospital. The police had a roadblock a quarter-mile out. Andy pulled up, flashing her hospital ID. "Ma'am, the hospital is on lockdown. We have an animal control situation," the young officer said, his eyes wide with fear as he glanced past her. "I'm a nurse. I think they're here for me," Andy said. The words sounded insane. The officer looked at her, then back at the hospital. Just then, the man in the suit turned his head, his gaze zeroing in on her car, a quarter-mile away. It was impossible. He couldn't see her. But he did. He said something to one of the people beside him, a woman Andy now saw, with silver-streaked hair, and began to walk. He didn't run. He just walked, a long, predatory stride, directly toward the roadblock. The wolves didn't move. They just watched. The officer unholstered his weapon. "Sir, stay back." The man, Kalen, didn't stop. The officer raised his pistol. Before he could even tense his finger, the silver-haired woman, Lyra, was there. She had moved from the ER entrance to the roadblock, a distance of 400 yards, in the blink of an eye. She simply appeared next to the officer. "He will not harm you," Lyra's voice said, laced with a lupine growl. "But if you point that weapon at my king, I will tear your throat out before you can blink." The officer froze, his face pale. Kalen stopped 10 feet from Andy's car. He looked past the officer, his eyes, a piercing, lupine grey, locking onto Andy's. She felt the impact like a physical blow, stripping the air from her lungs. He knew her. "Andy Dante," he stated. It wasn't a question. His voice was the same one from the phone, but in person, it was a force of nature. "You called." The world seemed to shrink to the space between Andy's driver's side window and the man standing outside it. The police, the news helicopters, the ring of impossible beasts, it all faded into a dull roar. I dialed the wrong number," Andy stammered, her hand still on the car door. "No," Kalen said, his expression unreadable, but his eyes intense. "You did not." He looked at the trembling police officer. "Open the barrier. She is with me." The officer, clearly outranked by a power he didn't understand, numbly waved her through. Andy drove slowly, her car crawling past the man. He simply turned and walked beside her, matching her pace effortlessly. When she parked in the staff lot, he was at her door before she could cut the engine. He opened it for her. It was a gesture of old-world courtesy that seemed bizarrely at odds with the army of wolves at his command. Andy stepped out, her legs unsteady. Up close, he was overwhelming. He wasn't just handsome, he was beautiful in a dangerous, feral way. He radiated a palpable energy, like the air before a lightning strike. "Who are you?" she asked. "I am Kalen." "You were in distress." He looked at the hospital entrance. The male. "Croft. Where is he?" He's in surgery. He has a bypass scheduled at 7 a.m., Andy said, her nurse's brain kicking in on autopilot. "You can't just... What are those?" She gestured to the perimeter. "My security," Kalen said dismissively. "They will harm no one, unless they are threatened, or unless I am." He took a step toward the ER doors. "Take me to him." "Wait, you can't! This is a hospital! You can't just interrupt a surgery. You'll kill someone." Kalen paused. His gaze softened. "Just a fraction. You are concerned for a patient, even after you were threatened." He seemed to file this information away. "Then we will wait. Wait. You're just going to stand here with an army of wolves." "Yes." He crossed his arms. "He will have to come out eventually." And so they stood, an island of impossible tension in the ambulance bay. Hospital staff peered through the reinforced windows, their faces pale. Kalen's beta, Lyra, stood 10 feet away, her eyes scanning every window, every rooftop, a sentinel of inhuman patience. An hour passed, then 2. The surgery would be ending. At 9:17 a.m., the automatic doors to the surgical wing hissed open. Dr. Alistair Croft emerged, stripping off his surgical cap, chatting amiably with another surgeon. He was back in his element, arrogant and untouchable. He hadn't yet seen the scene outside. Unbelievable incompetence. If the resident had half a brain. He stopped mid-sentence as he saw Andy. His smile faltered, turning into a sneer. "Andy, I see you're back. Did you come to apologize for last night?" Then he saw Kalen. Croft's arrogance was a shield, and he raised it instantly. "Can I help you, sir? This is a restricted area for staff only." Kalen was utterly still. He uncrossed his arms. "Dr. Alistair Croft." "That's Chief of Surgery Croft," he corrected. "You are the male who cornered Andy Dante in a supply closet," Kalen stated. Croft's blood ran cold. He looked at Andy, his eyes narrowing with venom. "You told him? You went and found some meathead to protect you." "This will be your job, Andy. I'll have your nursing license." "You will have nothing," Kalen said, his voice dropping to that terrifyingly cold register. He took one step forward. Lyra was at his side instantly, but he waved her back. "You are in my hospital," Croft blustered, trying to regain control. "You will leave now, or I will have you arrested for trespassing." "You touched what was mine," Kalen growled. The sound was not human. It was a deep, guttural vibration that seemed to come from his very soul. I don't know what you're talking about." Croft's face was pale. The shield was cracking. "You put your hands on her. You threatened her. You used your position of power to intimidate her." Kalen was now standing directly in front of the surgeon, close enough that Croft had to crane his neck to look up at him. "In my world, we have very specific punishments for such things." "This is not your world," Croft spat. "This is civilization. You can't do anything to me." Kalen smiled. It was the most terrifying expression Andy had ever seen. It held no humor, only death. "I can," Kalen said softly. "But she is a healer. She values life, even yours." He looked at Croft's right hand, the one that had grabbed Andy's phone, the one that had pinned her to the wall. "So I will not kill you," Kalen said. "I will simply take the tool you used to threaten her." Before Croft could even blink, before he could process the words, Kalen's hand shot out. It wasn't a punch. It was a precise, controlled movement of impossible speed and strength. He seized Croft's right hand and squeezed. The sound was not a snap. It was a wet, sickening crunch, a sound of multiple bones, from the wrist to the knuckles, shattering simultaneously into gravel. Croft let out a scream that was barely human, a shriek of pure, unadulterated agony, and collapsed to his knees, cradling his ruined hand. It was a mangled, unrecognizable mess. "Alistair!" the other surgeon cried, rushing forward. Lyra blocked him. "Do not interfere." Kalen looked down at the whimpering surgeon, his face devoid of any emotion save contempt. "Your career is over," Kalen stated flatly. "You will never hold a scalpel again. You will never harm another person. And if you ever say her name again, if you ever look in her direction, my wolves will not be so disciplined." He turned his back on the screaming man. He walked to Andy, who was staring, her hand over her mouth, her mind unable to reconcile the brutal violence with the profound, primal sense of justice she felt. He had done what the HR department, the police, and the hospital board never could. Kalen stopped in front of her. His eyes, which had been silver-grey, were now swirling with a faint, golden light. His expression was soft, almost tender. The transition was jarring. "Andy," he said, his voice now gentle, "you are safe. But we need to talk. Your life has just changed." Kalen didn't wait for an answer. He gently took Andy's arm, a touch that was light as a feather, but held the unyielding strength of steel, and guided her away from the scene. The other surgeon was now frantically calling a code for Croft. Where are we going?" Andy asked, her voice trembling. She was in shock, her medical training screaming at her to help Croft, but her instincts screaming at her to stay with Kalen. "Somewhere private." He led her to a secluded trauma lounge, a room reserved for grieving families. Lyra and 2 other men, also dressed in black, followed. They didn't enter the room but took up positions outside the door. They were guards. Kalen closed the door, plunging the room into a quiet intimacy. "You broke his hand," Andy whispered, sinking into one of the uncomfortable vinyl chairs. You crippled him." "I did," Kalen said, without a trace of remorse. He remained standing, a mountain of a man in the small room. "He will never harm you again." "But who are you? What gives you the right? And those wolves, they're not real. They can't be." Andy's mind was trying to find a rational explanation. "Are they some kind of advanced robotics? Military trained?" Kalen almost smiled. "My name is Kalen Thorne. I am the Alpha King of the Silver Moon Concordat, and the wolves are very, very real. As am I." "Alpha King? Concordat? That sounds like a video game, or a cult." It is a civilization, Kalen corrected her, his patience clear. A society that lives parallel to your own, hidden by magic, by wealth, and by your world's willful ignorance. We are lycanthropes. Andy stared. Werewolves. The word felt absurd on her tongue. You're telling me you're a werewolf? That's a clinical delusion. Lycanthropy. It's in the DSM-5. It is not a delusion, Andy. It is my blood. It is my nature. To prove his point, he held up his hand. He flexed his fingers and Andy gasped. His nails thickened, darkened, and extended into 1-inch-long claws, sharp as obsidian. The sound was a soft, terrifying snick. Andy stopped breathing. This was not a trick. This was not a delusion. She was seeing it. He retracted them just as quickly. Do you believe me now? She shook her head, trying to clear it. So what? You're a werewolf. Why me? Why are you here? That call. It was an accident. It was not, Kalen said, his voice softening again. He took a step closer, and Andy felt that strange, magnetic pull. For my kind, there is one thing that transcends all politics, all power, all law, the mate bond. Mate bond? It is a fated connection, a recognition of the soul. An alpha king can live for millennia and never find his. I have lived for over 1,200 years, Andy. I have built empires, and I have destroyed them. I have waited. And last night, my fated mate, my other half, called me in terror. He looked at her, his grey eyes piercing her. You, Andy Dante, are my mate. Andy's world tilted. This was too much. A predatory surgeon, a secret world, an army of wolves, and now this. No, I'm a nurse. I live in Crestview Arms. I have student loan debt and a 2010 sedan. I am not the fated mate of a werewolf king. You have the wrong person. I do not, he said with absolute certainty. The bond is why your call came to me. It bypassed my security. It bypassed all magical wards. It was a cry from your soul directly to mine. It is why I felt your fear as if it were my own. It is why, when Croft touched you, I felt a rage that could burn cities. So what happens now? Andy whispered, terrified of the answer. Do you... What? Take me away? Lock me in a tower? I protect you, Kalen said simply, which is why you can no longer stay here. I can't just leave. I have a life, a job. I have responsibilities. You had a life, Lyra's sharp voice cut in. She had opened the door, her face grim. My king, the human news channels are broadcasting this globally. The local police are calling in the National Guard. We have broken protocol. We are exposed. Kalen's face hardened. Let them come. They are insects. They are not the only ones watching, Lyra pressed, her eyes flicking to Andy with open mistrust. The Crimson Fang Pack, Alpha Marcus. He has been challenging your borders for a decade. He has been looking for a weakness, and today you have paraded one in front of the entire world. She is not a weakness, Kalen growled. She is human, Lyra shot back. To them she is a vulnerability, a soft target. They will not challenge you, my king. They will come for her. As if summoned by her words, Andy's phone buzzed. It was Sarah. Andy answered, her hand shaking. Sarah. Andy, my God, are you okay? That man, Andy, there's someone in your apartment. What? Andy went cold. The police, your apartment complex manager called them. Said there was a disturbance. I overheard the scanner. They said, forced entry. Andy, someone broke into your home. Andy looked at Kalen, her eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. Lyra was right. Her old life, her old identity, was already a target. Croft was just the beginning. They are already moving, Kalen said, his voice grim. He looked at Andy, his decision absolute. "You were right, Lyra. We are leaving. She comes with us. Now." The escape was a blur. Kalen didn't ask again. He simply put a hand on Andy's back and propelled her toward the ER exit. "Lyra, the extraction protocol," he commanded. Outside, the scene had escalated. The police line was thicker, and a SWAT vehicle was nosing its way down the street. But they all kept their distance, deterred by the silent, unblinking wall of silver fur. "My king, 2 black vans just breached the perimeter from the north," Lyra said, her voice urgent as she listened to an earpiece. "They aren't human police. Crimson Fang insignia." "They are bold," Kalen growled. "Get her to the vehicle. We'll provide the distraction." "Vehicle? What vehicle?" Andy asked, her head snapping back and forth. A black, armored Rolls-Royce Cullinan, a machine that looked like it belonged to a warlord, pulled silently up the ambulance ramp, scattering the wolves. The driver, one of Kalen's men, threw open the back door. "Andy, get in!" Kalen ordered. I can't just... Go!" he roared. And this time, his voice was not human. It was a command that rattled her bones, and her body obeyed before her mind could, scrambling into the opulent leather and steel interior. Lyra jumped in beside her. "Drive!" she yelled at the driver. The moment the door slammed, the vehicle shot forward, accelerating from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. Andy was thrown back against the seat. She looked out the rear window. She saw Kalen. He was not getting in. He and his other 2 guards were standing, facing the hospital, as the 2 black vans skidded to a halt. "Wait! You're leaving him!" Andy cried. "The king is the bait," Lyra said, her face taut with tension, her eyes scanning the road ahead. "We are the package. He is diverting them." "Diverting them? They'll kill him." Lyra actually laughed, a short, harsh bark. "Human. You have no idea what he is. Pray for them." Out the back window, Andy watched in horror as 10 men in black tactical gear piled out of the vans. They were armed. They raised their weapons. Kalen changed. It wasn't a grotesque, movie-like transformation. It was a shift, a horrifying, fluid ripple of power. He didn't become a full wolf, but he grew, his suit tearing at the shoulders as his muscles expanded, his face contorted, his jaw elongating, claws ripped from his fingertips, his eyes burned with molten silver. He moved faster than a bullet. He was on the first man before the man's finger tightened on the trigger, throwing him through the windshield of his own van. The remaining 9 opened fire. The bullets, Andy saw, seemed to slow as they neared him, impacting his skin but not penetrating, as if hitting invisible armor. He was a whirlwind of violence, a primal force of nature. In seconds it was over. The men were not dead, Andy the nurse noted, but they were broken, disarmed, and incapacitated. Andy turned back, her stomach churning. The Rolls-Royce was now on the highway, speeding out of the city at 140 miles per hour. "Where are you taking me?" Andy whispered. "Sanctuary," Lyra said. "Thorn Valley, the heart of the Concordat, the only place you will be safe." The ride was silent for an hour. Andy's mind was a whirlwind of impossibilities. Croft, Kalen, the wolves, the mate Bond, the fight. Her apartment had been breached. Her old life was gone, evaporated in less than 12 hours. A new twist of fear gripped her. If I'm his mate, does that mean I have to? Lyra looked at her, her expression softening for the first time. The bond is of the soul, human. It is not a matter of force. It is a C-suite of protection, a pull. The king has not had a mate in all his long life. He is possessive, but he will not take anything you do not give. Our law is very clear on that. The mate's will is absolute. This was a small but significant comfort. Suddenly the car's engine sputtered. "What is this?" Lyra demanded of the driver. "I don't know, Beta," the driver said, his knuckles white on the wheel. "The engine, it's dying." The car coasted to a stop on a desolate stretch of highway, forests lining both sides. "This car is armored to withstand a missile. It does not just die," Lyra growled. She pulled a sidearm from beneath her jacket. "This is an ambush." The silence of the stopped car was deafening. "They knew our route," Lyra whispered. "Marcus has a high-level informant." The woods on the passenger side exploded. A man, dressed in black but with a dark red insignia, smashed the passenger window. The bulletproof glass spiderwebbed, but held. "They're here!" the driver yelled. But they weren't trying to get in Andy's door. They were trying to get to Lyra. A second figure appeared at Lyra's window and jammed a device to the glass. It hissed, and the glass began to melt. "They're using silver-laced acid," Lyra snarled, coughing as fumes filled the car. "Get out! Go! Andy, run into the woods. Run, and do not stop. I'm not leaving you. That is an order. You are the priority." Lyra kicked open her own door and met the attackers, shifting into a partial lupine form, her fangs and claws flashing. Andy scrambled out the other side. The driver was already out, firing his weapon. Andy did as she was told. She ran. She plunged into the dense forest, branches whipping her face. She could hear the fight behind her, the sounds of gunfire mixed with inhuman snarls and the tearing of flesh. She ran until her lungs burned. She didn't know where she was going. She was human. She was soft. She was prey. She tripped over a root and fell, tumbling down a small, muddy incline. She lay at the bottom, gasping, her ankle screaming in protest. She was lost. She heard a twig snap above her. She looked up. A man stood on the ridge, looking down at her. He was tall, with cruel, handsome features and blood-red eyes. He wore a dark red tactical suit. He was not one of Kaelin's men. "Well, well," the man said, his voice a mocking purr. "The little human nurse, the king's great weakness. Alpha Marcus, at your service." He smiled, revealing fangs sharper than Kaelin's. The king should have known. You can't protect a lamb by showing it to the world. He started to walk down the incline, slow and savoring. "He will give me everything to get you back." Andy's blood turned to ice. She tried to scramble backward, but her ankle buckled. She was trapped. And then a silver blur shot from the trees to her left, slamming into Marcus with the force of a freight train. It was Lyra. She was bleeding from a dozen cuts, her suit in tatters. But she was alive. "Run, Andy!" she screamed, her voice a wolf's roar as she locked fangs and claws with the Crimson Fang Alpha. Andy didn't run. Her mind, the ER nurse's mind, took over. Lyra was hurt. She couldn't win this fight. Andy looked around, frantic. Her eyes landed on a thick, broken branch, its end splintered into a sharp point. Marcus threw Lyra off, sending her crashing into a tree. He advanced on her, his claws extended. "A brave Beta. You will die with your king's shame on your lips." "No," Andy screamed. Marcus turned, annoyed by the interruption. That was his mistake. Andy, ignoring the pain in her ankle, surged forward and jammed the pointed stake of the branch deep into the back of Marcus's thigh, aiming for the femoral artery. Marcus roared, a sound of shock and agony. He spun, backhanding Andy and sending her flying. But the damage was done. Dark, arterial blood was gushing from the wound. He was human-made, but he still bled. "You bitch!" he hissed, clutching his leg. He stumbled, his power fading with the blood loss. Lyra, seeing her opening, was on him. But before she could strike the killing blow, a howl echoed through the woods. Marcus's pack was coming. "We have to go." Lyra grabbed Andy's arm, hauling her to her feet. "Now!" They fled, leaving the wounded, enraged Alpha Marcus behind. They ran for what felt like hours. Lyra, even injured, seemed to draw on a limitless well of stamina, practically dragging Andy through the dense forest. Finally, they reached a high granite cliff face that looked like a dead end. Lyra pressed her bleeding palm against a specific, unmarked stone. There was a low groan, and a section of the cliff face, a massive, perfectly disguised slab of rock, receded, revealing a tunnel lit by soft, modern lighting. "Where are we?" Andy panted, collapsing against the tunnel wall. "The back door," Lyra said, her breathing heavy. "Welcome to Thorn Valley." The tunnel opened into a vast subterranean cavern that had been converted into a high-tech hub. Men and women in a mix of tactical gear and business suits moved with purpose. It was like a Bond villain's lair mixed with a medieval fortress. The tunnel led to an elevator, which rose silently through the mountain. When the doors opened, Andy gasped. They were in a massive, open-air valley, surrounded on all sides by impassable, snow-capped mountains. The valley itself was a blend of ancient and modern, a village of stone and timber longhouses clustered around a central, gleaming tower of black glass and steel, Kaelin's stronghold. Wolves, real four-legged ones, roamed the grounds, mingling with people. "This is impossible," Andy whispered. "It is home," Lyra said. She was finally allowing herself to limp. "Come, you need to be seen by our healers, and the king will be here soon." Lyra's word was law. Andy was whisked away to an infirmary that made St. Jude's look archaic. Her ankle was treated, not just x-rayed, but scanned by a device that seemed to knit the bone and tissue back together with light. A few hours later, clean, dressed in soft, simple clothes, and her ankle feeling only bruised, she was sitting in a lavish suite in the glass tower. The window was an entire wall, overlooking the valley. It was beautiful, but it was a cage. The door opened. Kaelin stood there. He wasn't in the suit. He was dressed in simple black pants and a linen shirt. The violence from the hospital was gone. He looked tired and worried. He crossed the room in 2 strides and stopped just short of her. He didn't touch her. He just looked. His eyes scanned her, checking for injuries, his gaze lingering on her bandaged ankle. "Lyra told me what you did," he said, his voice quiet. "You faced Alpha Marcus. You, a human, with no training and no weapon. You wounded him." I'm an ER nurse," Andy said, her voice small. "I know where the arteries are." A low sound rumbled in his chest, a purr. "You are magnificent." He finally reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek. His skin was warm. The spark, the pull, was undeniable. It was terrifying, and it was the safest she had felt in her entire life. "I am sorry, Andy," he said, his thumb brushing her skin. "I exposed you. I was arrogant. My rage at Croft made me careless. I brought this danger to you." You saved me from Croft," she said, "and put you in the path of Marcus. He will not stop. He tasted your blood in a way. He knows you are my mate. He will use you to challenge me for the throne." The door opened again, admitting Lyra and a trio of stern-looking elders, their faces like carved granite. "My king," the lead elder, a man named Cassian, said, his voice a gravelly boom. "We must talk. The challenge has been issued." Kaelin sighed, his hand dropping from Andy. The king was back. "Marcus is wounded. He cannot challenge." "He has invoked the Kravos Maw," Cassian said, and the colour drained from Lyra's face. "A challenge of blood, not of strength. He claims you have broken the most ancient law, mating with a human. He demands a trial. The blood moon is in 3 days. He will be healed by then. He has no right, Kalen began. He does, Cassian insisted. The law is clear. No human shall share the Alpha's heart, for their weakness shall be the pack's poison. By bringing her here, you have validated his claim. The Council of Alphas is divided. They see her. He looked at Andy with pure contempt. They see a vulnerability, a pet. She is my queen, Kalen roared, the windows vibrating. She is a human who works in a hospital, Cassian shot back, unafraid. She has no knowledge of our world, our laws, our enemies. Marcus's pack has already infiltrated human society. They found her apartment. They found your convoy. He has an informant, Kalen, a spy high in your ranks, who is feeding him information. And it is her presence that is driving this. She is the wedge that will split our people. Andy felt the world shrinking. They all blamed her. She was the poison. Renounce her, Cassian said, his voice dropping. Set her aside. Send her away. Let us wipe her memory and place her somewhere new. Show the Council that your loyalty is to your people, not to this. No, Kalen said. The word was final. Then you will fight Marcus on the Blood Moon, and if you lose, he will kill you, and he will keep her. That is the law of the Kravos Moor. The elders left. Kalen stood at the window, his back to Andy. The weight of his kingdom was on his shoulders. Andy's mind was racing. A spy. They found my apartment. They found the convoy. Kalen, she said, her voice shaking but clear. He turned. The spy. It's not one of your people. He frowned. What do you mean? How could you know? They knew the convoy route, but they also knew where I lived. Crestview Arms, apartment 3B. How would one of your people know that? I only just met you. Kayla's eyes widened, following her logic. Only someone from your world. Someone who knew you. Someone who was watching me, Andy whispered, her blood running cold as the pieces clicked into place. Someone who knew I was being harassed. Someone who knew I was vulnerable. Someone who maybe even wanted me to be abducted, but never expected you to show up. Croft, Kalen breathed, his voice a venomous hiss. Alistair Croft. He wasn't just a predator, Andy said, her mind racing. He was working for Marcus. He was feeding him information. Maybe he uses his position at the hospital, access to patients, information. Maybe he provides Marcus with victims. The horror of the thought was staggering. Croft wasn't just a human threat. He was the link. When you broke his hand, you didn't just take his career, Andy said. You took him from Marcus too. You ruined him on all sides. He'd be desperate. And a desperate man is a dangerous one, Kalen finished. He's still in the city, and he's the only one who could have known both your address and somehow our movements. He must have had a tracker, or when he grabbed your phone. Kalen looked at Andy, a new, terrible understanding in his eyes. He didn't just hang up. He had your phone. He had time to clone it, to track it. He's the spy, Andy said, and he's still out there. The Blood Moon. 3 days later. The entire valley was shrouded in a tense, oppressive silence. The moon, a grotesque, weeping red eye in the sky, bathed the stronghold in crimson light. The duel was set. Alpha Marcus, his leg healed by their rapid restorative powers, had arrived with his contingent. He stood in the Arena of Judgment, a massive, ancient stone circle in the center of the valley. He was arrogant, his blood-red eyes fixed on Kalen. Kalen stood opposite him, stripped to the waist, his body a roadmap of ancient scars. Andy was forced to watch from a high balcony, guarded by Lyra. This is insane, Andy whispered. It's barbaric. Why is he doing this? Because the law demands it, Lyra said, her voice taut. The Kravos Mor is absolute. To refuse is to forfeit the throne. He is fighting for you, for his crown, for all of us. But it's a trap, Andy insisted. We know Croft is the spy. Marcus must have another plan. We swept the valley, Lyra said. Croft is not here. We have men hunting for him in the human world. He is irrelevant. This is a battle of alphas. No, Andy said, her mind working furiously. You don't understand the human mind. A surgeon, especially a sociopath like Croft, his ego is everything. Kalen didn't just break his hand. He humiliated him. This isn't about Marcus. This is about revenge. He has a plan. Down in the arena, the duel began. It was not a fight. It was a collision. The two alphas shifted, becoming 9 foot tall, bipedal monsters of fur, claw, and fang. Kalen was silver and black, a creature of shadow and moonlight. Marcus was a mottled brown and red, a creature of blood and earth. They tore into each other. The sound was a cacophony of roars, snarls, and the sickening thud of supernaturally strong bodies colliding. Kalen was the superior fighter, more skilled, more precise. But Marcus was fueled by a desperate, cheating rage. He was landing blows he shouldn't. Kalen seemed slower. His movements were becoming sluggish. "He's been poisoned," Andy whispered, her medical eyes seeing the signs. "His reflexes are delayed. Look at his breathing. It's too shallow." "Impossible," Lyra said. "His ceremonial drink was tested by 3 healers." "It wasn't the drink," Andy said, her eyes scanning the arena. "It's something in the air, something only he would be susceptible to." She looked at Marcus, who was bleeding but grinning. He knew he was winning. "Croft," Andy breathed. "He is here. He's a doctor. He wouldn't use a simple poison. He'd use an antigen, something specific." She looked around. Where is the ventilation for the arena?" Lyra pointed. A series of ancient ducts, carved into the stone. But they are guarded. "He wouldn't be in the ducts," Andy said. "He'd be at the intake, the main tower, the air system." Her eyes flew to the black glass tower she'd been staying in. "He's in the tower." "I'll send a team." "No time," Andy said. She grabbed Lyra. "Kalen is losing. You have to stop the fight. Cause a diversion." "I cannot interfere." "You have to. I'll find Croft. I know what to look for." Andy ran, not waiting for a reply. She sprinted for the tower elevator, Lyra's shouts behind her. She slammed the button for the top floor, the main air circulation and filtration hub. The doors opened. The room was a mass of humming machinery. And there he was, Dr. Alistair Croft. He was haggard, his right arm in a complex, high-tech cast, his face contorted with hate. He was standing over a large ventilation intake, emptying the contents of a pressurized canister into it. The air was thick with a faint, metallic smell. "Croft!" Andy yelled. He spun, his eyes wide with shock, then narrowing with pure malice. "The little nurse. Come to watch your monster die." "What is that?" Andy demanded, moving toward him. "A simple anesthetic," he sneered. "A vaporized silver particulate compound. Harmless to humans, of course. But to a lycanthrope? It binds to their unique hemoglobin. Slows the blood oxygen transfer. Makes them sluggish, weak. It's a beautiful piece of chemistry. I was going to publish." Down in the arena, Kalen fell to one knee. Marcus raised his claws for the killing blow. "Stop!" Lyra's voice boomed as she finally acted, firing a crossbow bolt that planted itself at Marcus's feet, violating the sacred rules. "The arena is tainted!" The crowd roared in confusion. Marcus paused, looking up, furious at the interruption. This bought Andy her moment. She lunged at Croft. She didn't attack him. She attacked the canister. She knocked it from his good hand. It clattered to the floor, rolling. Croft, enraged, lunged for her with his left hand, grabbing her by the throat. "I will kill you myself!" he shrieked, his mind clearly broken. Andy gagged, her vision narrowing. She was an ER nurse. She was a healer. But she was also a survivor. Her hand felt the heavy, metal canister on the floor. She grabbed it. With all her strength, she swung the canister up, striking Croft directly in the temple. He collapsed, unconscious. Andy scrambled to the vent, her hands flying to the control panel. She saw the purge function. She slammed her palm onto the button. A massive alarm blared. The system reversed, sucking the poisoned air out of the arena and venting it into the sky above. Down below, Kalen, on his knees, took a deep, shuddering breath. The fog in his mind cleared. He looked up. Marcus, distracted by Lyra and the chaos, turned back to Kalen, his eyes wide. Kalen moved. He wasn't sluggish anymore. He was the Alpha King. He rose like a silver thunderbolt. The fight was over in 5 seconds. He didn't kill Marcus. He broke both his arms and both his legs, leaving him a broken, whimpering heap on the stone. Kalen, in his half-shifted form, threw his head back and roared. It was a sound of absolute victory, a sound that echoed from every mountain. He shifted back, his human form reasserting itself as Lyra and the guards rushed in to secure Marcus. Kalen's eyes found the balcony. He saw her. He didn't wait. He leaped, clearing the 50-foot gap from the arena floor to her balcony in a single, impossible bound, landing silently in front of her. He was covered in blood, his and Marcus's. His eyes were wild. He looked at the unconscious form of Croft, then at Andy, her hands shaking, the canister still clutched in her hand. He said nothing. He just reached out, took the canister from her, and dropped it. Then he pulled her against him, his arms banding around her like steel, burying his face in her hair. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice thick. "You were poisoned," she whispered back, her voice muffled against his chest. I'm a nurse. I just... diagnosed." He pulled back, his hands framing her face. He looked at her, not as a king, not as a beast, but as a man. "The elders, Cassian, they said you were a weakness," Kalen said, his voice raw. "They said you were the poison." He smiled, a true, breathtaking smile. "They were wrong. You are the antidote." He looked past her, at his pack, which was now staring up at them in silence. He raised his voice, and it carried across the entire valley. "She is not our weakness. She is our strength. She is my mate. She is your queen." He turned back to Andy, and this time, when he kissed her, under the light of the blood moon, it wasn't a mistake. It was destiny. And so, Andy Dante, the ER nurse who made one wrong call, found herself in a world she never knew existed. She didn't just find a man, she found a king. She didn't just find love, she found a destiny. But the story is far from over. Alpha Marcus is defeated, but not gone. The Crimson Fang pack is still out there, and now they, and the rest of the supernatural world, know the Alpha King's one true weakness is also his greatest strength. Andy may have won the battle, but her new life as Queen of the Silver Moon Concordat has only just begun. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I loved telling it. If you enjoyed Andy and Kalen's journey, and if you want to hear what happens next, please show your support. Don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell so you never miss an update.